You're listening to the Crowdfunding Nerds Podcast, a podcast that will help you succeed before, during, and after your crowdfunding event. And now, here is your host, Andrew Lowen.
Welcome, everybody, to Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen, and I am joined, as always, by my SEO marketing wizard, Rick, and sexy Irish Sean.
I like how you just sort of like dropped off when you said Sean. You're like, hey, it's SEO wizard Rick and sexy Irish Sean.
Not even Irish.
But you live in Ireland, and you sound Irish.
Yeah, well, if I went swimming, does that make me a fish?
I mean, are you asking figuratively?
That's like a ontological question. Very deep philosophical. You could go ponder that.
That's for a different podcast. So in this podcast, we're actually going to get into how to write ad copy, good things to do, bad things to do. You know, we're going to talk about different perspectives. And then we're going to get into tips on developing a board game or video game from a marketing perspective. Things that I love to see as a marketer that you have done. Things that make my job easier, or I guess our job easier, right?
Right.
But first, I want to talk about something in our What's Up Nerd segment. We have to talk about something nostalgic, and that is MMORPGs. I spent way too much time in MMOs back in the day.
Like 12 years ago back in the day.
I think it's actually been a lot longer than 12 years. I think it's 17 years, 16 years. I remember thinking it was like 2003. I was graduating high school, and I was thinking, you know, World of Warcraft was on the horizon, and I thought, what kind of idiot would pay $15 a month for a video game? And I have since spent $15 a month for 15 years on that game before I got out.
So what expansion did you jump out at?
I last played at Mist of Pandaria.
Do you know what I think made World of Warcraft so popular? I believe it was the Lord of the Rings films that came out in the early noughties. Those were just basically a massive advertisement for a massive online role-playing game that has a fantasy theme. And I really think that was what made that game so popular. It brought a lot of people into the higher fantasy genre, was those films.
You know, Blizzard had, as a company, they had this really, really I was one of them, of course, dedicated fans. And whatever they did, I was going to try. Whether I knew it or not at the time, I was playing Warcraft 3, I was playing Diablo 2, and when they announced World of Warcraft, I was like, okay, I'll try it. And I remember thinking it was one of those moments in gaming that really in my life, I guess, that when I jumped into World of Warcraft and I went through a little starting zone and I went into a different zone that was like super huge, and then all of a sudden I saw a horde. I played Alliance. I saw a horde and we got into a fight, and I ended up, you know, jumping on them with a bunch of other Alliance, and, you know, because obviously they explored way outside their zone. My mind was blown, and I couldn't believe how large the world was. It was like I was an infant that just figured out how to walk.
But Andrew, I think you're right. I think for a lot of people, for me anyway, it was my first experience of online gaming, and it was like that as well. It's like this whole new world, and I was used to basically gaming with friends in like my living room or something, you know, but this was the first experience where I can actually like talk to people across the world, and this is like a living, breathing world, and my actions have consequences, and I can get famous on the server. You know, people can say, "Oh, there's so and so," and that was a cool concept when you're a teenager.
Absolutely. You know, actually, from a marketing perspective, thinking about what World of Warcraft did and the opportunity that it had and everything like that, there are probably a lot of reasons for its success. But one thing that I really loved that it did that was very cutting edge, I'm reminded of companies like Apple, where Steve Jobs said he's not looking to make a better version of what people already have. He's looking to show people what they should be interested in, what they should want. World of Warcraft was that we're going to show you something that you had no idea was possible.
All I could say is that if there was an award in that game for mediocrity, I would be the winner, because I am also in the Decade Plus Club, and I think my highest level toon or character is like level 40.
You are the noob of this podcast. That's awesome. All right, well, let's segue into how to write some ad copy. Let's talk about generally what sections of an ad, like the anatomy of an ad, and in particular, Facebook ads, because that's what's popular nowadays, especially for marketing board games. I think it's really the core of a board game marketing campaign would be Facebook ads. Now, of course, you have your rabid fans that should be the core of your campaign, but a well-run Facebook ad campaign is a great supplement to any board game Kickstarter campaign. Sean, you want to talk about the sections of an ad?
So when we're talking about an ad, we are really talking about an image and the text that accompanies that image, because image outperforms video all the time on Facebook.
In almost every circumstance.
Yeah. So it's really not worth your time messing with video on Facebook. And then we have ads that are compromised with primary text, headlines, and descriptions. Those are sort of the three main areas of text. And then you have your website URL, and then how is that displayed? Another thing to think about is a call to action button. So you can accompany your ad with a button, which sort of makes it stand out on anything else on the feed.
The three main sections of the ad are primary text, the image, and the headline that you're using. So the image should be kind of that feature. Whatever the ad is about, the image should speak loudest. The rest of the text should be kind of supporting the image. Don't do it vice versa. Make sure that whatever your image is, that's what you get to write about in your ad text. So the primary text is kind of the main body. So that would be what appears above the image. Like if you were on Facebook and you just started writing a status update, it would be like the status update section. So what you want to write, generally, there are a number of different ways to write. We'll get into the types of ad styles that I have found to work well for us. But you're going to tell people about the game. You're going to talk about facts, ask people questions, maybe feature bullet points on, the pros of the game, or, talk about your fame, acclaim, and what other people are saying. In the Facebook Ads Manager, it's generally 2 to 3 lines that you want to, and no more. If you do write longer than 3 lines, you will get the dreaded ... which is Facebook saying your ad text is too long. We're going to cut it off and give people the option to see more. You don't really want that. You want to get your message across in the shortest possible time frame, because people are impatient and they are willing to read a little bit, but they're not really willing to put the effort into clicking a button that says see more.
Yeah, that should be formatted in a way that is very conversational, right? It shouldn't be capitalized, shouldn't be, you should write and format it like you're just typing a sentence out normally.
Right. It's a lot of the time for Facebook ads, you kind of want to disguise them in a way. It might be a little bit of a dirty word, because we're not really trying to make it seem like this is not an ad, but you want to blend into everything else that people are posting on Facebook. You don't want to make it all weird, like if you had all caps or whatever, then that's probably going to be different than most of the things that are on Facebook. If you had no text at all and just an image by itself, it's kind of a lose-lose. If you've got something that feels corporate and not personal, if it's not something that really connects with who is viewing it, it's not going to perform as well. A great tip for writing copy that connects with your audience would be using language like you and your. You want to actually bring the viewer into your ad. You want to engage that individual person that is reading your ad.
And then the headline, how's the headline different then from this, primary text?
The headline generally is a hook. So the hook of the ad. A lot of the time, this is maybe even the hook of the product, the hook of the game, what makes your game special. I would never want someone to write, coming soon to Kickstarter here. That's not interesting to me. I want to know why I should care. Like, why I should care about this ad. Like, explore a dystopian post-apocalyptic world, even though that's probably too long, or whatever it is. Just give me some sort of hook, a reason that I should care.
Yeah, I know the headline is 40 characters max. You don't want to go past 40 characters on your headline, including spaces.
The website URL should also kind of support whatever it is. If your product is live on Kickstarter, you want to use kickstarter.com/hot tabletop, or coming soon, or whatever it's another small place to deliver a message. Let's talk about the image though, because that's really the most important piece. I could talk all day about the things that people do wrong, but let's talk about what a great image looks like. Like what makes a great image to you?
You know, occasionally when I'm flicking through Facebook and I see a great ad, I stop and I take a picture of it. And probably what we'll eventually do is we'll probably do an article of, we'll just recreate some of these ads as examples of these what we think are great ads. And usually they're eye-catching. They got a lot of contrast. They don't have much text within them. And there's something about it which makes you pause. I think that's the key, because on Facebook, everyone's scrolling and you probably have about half a second to actually engage someone's attention for them to stop and consider whatever it is you're presenting before they're going to scroll again. So you really want to use this image to grab their attention, but then also very clearly communicate what it is that you're trying to get them to basically get more information on. So
Absolutely.
we found with board games, right, having the actual box of the board game with the pieces of the board game next to the box performs way better than something maybe a bit more abstract. And
Like, for example, let's say the actual box versus the art of the box.
yeah,
We find that the box itself, like the 3D rendered box with the art on it and everything, oftentimes outperforms the actual cover art, because people realize that it's a game. When they're scrolling down, it's a game that they haven't seen before.
and the cover art could mean it's a video game, could mean it's an audiobook, could be a novel, it could be anything. So I think when you have the actual box of the game, it's very clear this is a box game, a tabletop game. And now look, it's on Kickstarter. So
Right. And that kind of segues a little bit into the audience. When we create an ad, we want to speak to a very specific audience. If you're talking to, let's say using board games as an example, if you are talking to a generic board game audience in the US, I find that that's right around 3.5 million Facebook accounts are what we will target for general board gamers that are also into backing projects on Kickstarter. I'd like to break those people into a niche and then speak more specifically to the interest of that niche. So I don't want to say this is a great board game you should check out. I want to say this is for example, one game that we're working on, this is a post-apocalyptic game of what, blah, blah, blah. And I want to market to fans of post-apocalyptic, like the Resident Evil series, the Fallout series, Book of Eli, other interests like that. And then also board games and Kickstarter. That way, people who are interested in board games, but also post-apocalyptic stuff, I'm speaking to them and I'm using language like post-apocalyptic in the actual ad text. What do you think about that, John?
yeah, absolutely. There needs to be consistency in everything that the ad is doing. When it comes to setting up an ad, we've actually created a PowerShell script. So if you're on a Windows machine, we've created a script. So all you have to do is open up your ads manager on Facebook, run the script, and it will create what we do basically for generic board game ads. And that way you can use that as a starting point to craft your own ad. And some might find that helpful. I'm sure we'll include a link for that somewhere in the show notes or somewhere.
That's an awesome idea. And as far as audiences go, you have 3 different groups to an interest. When you market a project on Kickstarter, let's say, you need to have Kickstarter as an interest. If you want people to back your product, then it's much better to go for people that know how to back a product, right? So that's why we use Kickstarter. That's in its own interest section by itself. Then in addition to that, we have a second criteria where they also have to like board games if it's a board game, video games if it's a video game. So that section will have things like Dice Tower, Board Game Geek, board games, Settlers of Catan, any hobby level board game. And that's kind of the general board game section. And we find, I think there are probably 15 to 20 of those various interests that we'll use. And then there's a third section. The third section they also have to like is what I call the specific interest. So we're marketing, for example, a board game that is, it's called Cryptid Cafe. It's a game where you are kind of like a legendary Sasquatch creature that is serving other legendary creatures in a cafe, right? A board game. So the specific audience for that are people, number one, who like legendary creatures, mythical beasts, other things like that. We found interest for Yeti. Mermaids, unicorns, dragons. That would be an example of a very, very specific interest. Now, when I build an ad to talk to those people, I'm going to reference mythical beasts or maybe a particular beast. Just by simply mentioning those things, if they care about that, then it will appeal to them. And people tend to buy products that are specifically designed for them, right? They don't want to, that's why there are a million different multivitamins. There's a multivitamin for young men. There's a multivitamin for middle-aged men. There's a prenatal multivitamin for pregnant women. And they might all have the same ingredients in them, save the prenatal has a little bit more of this or that. So in the same way, just in the development of our ad, we need to appeal to the conditioning of our audience. What do they care about? We need to talk about those things.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest mistakes is to be confusing. We were looking at an ad the other day, and it was like, this looks like a good game. But then they inserted this word. It was cybersecurity. It was a game about potatoes and pirates or something. Like, this looks like a good game. But then they threw in this word cybersecurity. You're like, well, what does that have to do with anything of this theme? And instead of creating intrigue, it created confusion, and it made you just want to scroll past. And that's the wrong sort of emotions you want to be provoking with your ad. You want to make it clear and create intrigue so that people want to investigate further. By throwing in that word, which seems to be out of context, it makes people think, oh, forget this.
Right. What I think is, and the way that I rationalize it, the way I teach, is that each word needs a purpose to be in that ad copy. And if we can't clearly define the purpose of that word, including simple words like a, and, or, whatever, then we eliminate them. And it's a better ad for it. So if you are looking at your ad text, it is highly advised to just pare down words and make absolutely sure that the people that are going to see your ads will resonate with every single word.
So I think another mistake people can make is saying things that people can easily disagree with. An example of this, there's a great game. It's called 5 Minute Dungeon. I think it's a fun game. It's a fun game to play with your family. It's, sort of this lighthearted game. But their catchphrase to the game, which I completely disagree with, I think it's a horrible catchphrase for a game that is, is quite well designed. It's got great art. It's the most fun you can have in 5 minutes. And that just simply isn't true. And people can easily disagree with that. And I just think it's a horrible catchphrase for a decent game. But that's something to be aware of as well. It's just saying things which maybe can't be demonstrated, can't be proved, maybe things that people could easily disagree with. And people are very dismissive. So if you make an assertion, you can't actually back it up. It's far more likely that people are just going to think, oh, this is clickbait, and they're going to keep on scrolling past.
As a married man with soon to be 6 children, I can think of other things that are more fun that only take 5 minutes. Yeah, no, that's totally right. And actually, to kind of expand on that, in ad copy, things that people can easily disagree with are, even single words. When you call something amazing, revolutionary is a word I hate. Incredible, awesome. I immediately, irrationally, by the way, as a consumer, I'm not rational. Consumers oftentimes are not rational. What we do is we use shortcuts. Instead of using pure logic to justify decisions, oftentimes we'll buy on emotion and then later justify with logic. If you've ever seen somebody buy an expensive car, they will tell you all of the logical reasons, but oftentimes it's because I wanted it or because it looked good or whatever, right? Because they got you in the behind the wheel and it was a great test drive and it made you feel powerful, whatever. Now, there's a conversation that is happening inside the head of the consumer. It is not a conversation that will come out of their mouth, but the conversation going on inside their head is the one that you need to address. So when I'm having a conversation inside my head, I'm using these shortcuts, as I mentioned before. One of the shortcuts is, I do not believe what you are saying is true. How will you deal with that? It's not rational. It's just an automatic customer shortcut. I don't believe what you're saying is true. So when we're using words like revolutionary, your product may honestly be revolutionary. Let's say Dominion for its time. the very first deck builder was, I believe it's the first deck builder, at least. It's the first one I ever played. That was quite revolutionary. But if we say it was revolutionary at the time, before anybody has any experience with it, that's going to be something that people can disagree with. And, you know, they might say it's not revolutionary at all. There was a deck builder before Dominion, blah, blah. And then you give people room to kind of throw you under the bus and dismiss you.
Another way this can manifest itself is if you sort of you make a connection between your product and another product or service, and you say, oh, we're going to be the Netflix killer, or we're going to be the, this happened with World of Warcraft all the time, right? With new MMOs coming up, this is going to be the next WoW killer. And of course it never killed WoW. And it's not a really good place to, market your game off of the back of another game, because you can't really compare.
Right. I also think in the same vein, it's a big mistake to say it's like Pandemic, but better. Or it's like Pandemic mixed with Seven Wonders with a little bit of Dominion sprinkled in, but better. It's like, what does that even mean? Pandemic is a game I know is fun. I'll just play that instead of yours. It's not a good idea to say it's like an experience that, it's like this thing that you understand. I get why people try to do that, but when you say it's like this experience that you enjoyed but better, again, it's something that I disagree with inside my own head. It's like, how would you know if I would like it better? And I tend to be cynical, and I find by and large customers tend to be quite cynical.
It might undermine their experiences as well. They might have had great times with those games and might have, an emotional attachment to them. And if you're basically saying, oh, well, all your experiences with this game were wrong, that again, it puts your marketing on the wrong foot. It's negative, and you want to try to be positive and point people towards the good things about your game, not the bad things about some other product.
That's true. And maybe on the other foot, what if you had a terrible experience with that product? What if you do not like Pandemic? It's one of those things that, I'm frustrated with Pandemic because it's a quarterbacking game. And when we played it, my friend dominated and basically played for all the four players. I don't want to have an experience like that at all. I think that you're much better off just simply not drawing the comparison. And so that's my recommendation. Just don't draw that comparison. You don't need to. Another thing that really kind of grinds my gears a little bit is when people say, this game has unlimited replayability. I will probably play your game 4 times. Maybe it'll stay on my shelf for 2 years and then I'll sell it. Maybe I'll get it out, read the rules, and play it once. I don't care if you have 98 million ways to set up a map. I'm not going to play 98 million times. And again, I don't believe that you have 98 million absolutely unique, game-changing, experience-changing variations to your product. And if you did, I kind of want a consistent experience each time. I mean, there's 90 million ways that different cubes can show up in Pandemic, but it doesn't really change the game a whole lot, right?
Yeah. I suppose there's other games that probably do that better as well, like chess. If you want a game that has lots of replay value and that stood the test of time, that already exists. So how are you different?
Yeah. The next one is the bait and switch.
Oh no.
Let's talk about the bait and switch. What is a bait and switch?
Well, Richard, do you want to talk about an example of a bait and switch that you've encountered in your life?
That happens all the time. In fact, let's look at the one that I see quite a bit in affiliate marketing these days, where they offer, like someone will be like, oh, I got this great thing that you'll like. I wrote it in a book. I'm going to give you this book for free. And you're like, cool. So you put in your email address and they goes, oh, but I got to charge you for shipping and handling. And then you get to the little shipping and handling spot. And it's like $19.95 for shipping and handling. And you're like, pretty much, if you're smart, like most people are, you'll realize that, the $19.95 mostly is not going to be the cost of shipping.
Yeah,
it's going
to be like $4 for shipping.
It's going to be the quote handling part, which pretty much is the cost of the book. So it's a really bad disguise of saying, hey, we're going to give you a free book, but it's not free. And they're goading you into, oh, but it's a value thing though. They're saying, hey, look, it's free. It's free.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, it's not free. And there's a lot of, I've seen a lot of ads similar to that out there that where, well, they promise something free, but then in the end there is some kind of like hook where you're actually paying like, oh, this is free, but you have to be a member of my club and you have to sign up for a monthly fee on that, or shipping and handling. So there's a lot of things like that.
Mhm.
So yeah, bait and switch, I mean, yeah, it's gonna get you some sales in the short term, but it's gonna make you look pretty bad in the long run. I mean, when I see those ads, I just think those people are scum.
Yeah, that's the problem, is that, when you promise value and then deliver some value with snake oil as well, you're going to upset people. They may still, I mean, I can think of one example that I totally got bait and switched with a book that it was free and it had $16.95 shipping. And I was kind of pissed off, but I ended up buying the book anyway because I wanted the content. And the only thing I remember about that experience is that I was bait and switched. I still remember the cost of shipping and how junky it really annoyed me. And then of course I'm on emails, the guy dunks me on his email marketing list and spams me, and just a very bad taste in my mouth. Unsubscribe and disavow all knowledge of said guy.
What's even worse is when you get that book. So you went ahead and you paid your $19.95 for shipping and handling. The book comes in, and you open up this book. It looks like it's got quite a few pages. You're like, okay, this is cool. And you open this book, and the book is like one big infomercial for all their other products.
Oh yes.
Like literally, it's like, I'm going to give you this little tip, but hey, if you want everything, go to get this product for me. And then the next chapter is about something else.
Mhm.
Oh, here's a little tidbit on this. But hey, if you want to know all about this chapter, you got to get this product for me.
Right.
So those irk me pretty bad.
Yeah, so, while we're on the extreme example, we've got things like up to 90% off our online store. And then you find the quote unquote 90% off item is a sticker that costs $2, but it's only 20 cents. You don't want to pay, $10 shipping and get a 20-cent sticker. So obviously you wanted whatever the main thing was, if a t-shirt, a board game, you find out the t-shirt or the board game, the main thing that you actually wanted is like 10% off.
Or they've hiked up the price. So yes, it is 90% off, but they've increased the overall price by 10,000%.
Yeah, exactly. An online course that's normally $99, and then we're giving you 90% off, and the 90% off is the quote unquote true value of said course, $999 marked down. It reminds me of all the Black Friday shoppers. People wait till Black Friday to shop and buy something that was marked up so that it could be marked down. So how does this relate to Kickstarter though? I mean, let's go into ads. What are some specific examples of ads that bait and switch? I'll start with one is, when you draw people in with comedy and then you switch to a serious tone.
Yeah, or you use half naked woman, in like your sort of fantasy game to draw people in, and that's a form of bait and switch as well, because you're basically just trying to allure through those visuals, but the game really isn't about that, and it's sort of inconsequential, and really it's not necessary to sell good products. It's just a way to basically get clicks and get people to take action.
Sensational headlines is another one. You've never played a game like this before, or 5 reasons that whatever, you won't believe number 3. Those there are a lot of different things that people try, but avoid the bait and switch. And why are we avoiding the bait and switch? It's because you want people to want your thing. Your ad needs to give people a promise. So you're actually making a promise with an ad that you're going to get more of this if you click on my ad. You're going to learn more about this if you click on my ad. And so I will even go a step further and say the image that I use in the ad, I want them to see that very same image or a version of that when they hit the landing page. I want them to know that they made it to the right spot. So when they click an ad and they go to wherever it takes them, if it's a Kickstarter.com URL or if it's your website or whatever, I want them to actually see the very same image that they clicked on so that it confirms in their mind, yes, that is what I expected. And that's really the whole thing with the ad. You need to bait people in with something that they actually consider to be worthy of further discovery. And then you need to confirm that they're at the right place after they get to the landing page, so that they continue their process of discovery. In the end, the whole goal is that you want them to have a desire for the product itself, because the product is a good product and it looks like a good product. I'll say another, final bait and switch that I see all the time is when somebody uses art. This will happen all the time with first-time creators, where they'll have this dream of a game, and they'll pay for art, and it's cool-looking art and a garbage game. It really is like untested and so on and so forth, and it looks that way when but they're baiting me in with nice art because there's a talented artist they paid. So I think it would be worthwhile to review types of ad styles that I have found that work pretty well. When I say ad styles, I'm talking mainly the primary text area and the general theme of the ad's purpose. The first one I find is most common is the introduction, where it's introducing X game. I'm developing a board game called Deliverance. Introducing Deliverance, a Christian fantasy dungeon crawler for 2 to 4 players, or it's actually 1 to 4 players, 1 to 5. With text like that, it's just a simple introduction of the game with a little bit of fact, that you might care about. I'm answering the question, what is it? So introducing game name, a type of game about a thing that you should care about for X number of players. That's the tried and true introduction. So the next style is the thematic question. Example of this would be, so you really want to bathe them in the theme of what it is that your game does. So one recent game that we marketed was Rurik Stone and Blade. It was an expansion for Rurik Dawn of Kiev that was pretty successful. And we led with the year is 860. The factions of ancient Kievan Rus are, whatever. I'm terrible at making stuff up on the fly like this, but factions of ancient Kievan Rus are infighting. Will you rise to the top, or will you fade into obscurity? Something like that. It's short. You lead kind of with a thematic fact or thematic intro about the game, the theme of the game, and then you ask a question to that person that makes it seem like, hey, this is a competitive game. Are you going to win, or are the other players going to win? Or, if it's cooperative, are you going to overcome the forces of darkness, or whatever it is? So that's the kind of the thematic question ad style. The next one, call it the feature bullet style. So you've got maybe it's a thematic introduction. You mentioned the first segment of the ad has to be the most important. I really like theme. The heavier theme a game has, the easier it is to sell and the easier it is to position. So I like to, introduce it with a little bit of theme, but then you can actually use bullet points with emojis or dashes or dots or whatever, and you can see the read more. One of the campaigns I worked on maybe about a year ago, it's called the Isofarian Guard. Their most successful ad was one that had like 7 major features: rich voiceover narration, heavy weighted poker chips, 5 separate campaigns, 10 hours or 50 plus hours of whatever right inside the box, and that kind of thing. And then the last one is the fame and acclaim, I call it. The fame and acclaim ad style is where you say, if you've won any awards, let people know this game has won awards. The acclaimed blah blah that won the Seal of Excellence from the Dice Tower, or you can even use a quote from a reviewer, a direct quote from a reviewer. So those are 4 different ad styles: the introduction, the thematic question, the feature bullets, and the fame and acclaim style for ads.
One of the most important things about your ad is you're trying to build trust with your audience. Really, the selling is going to happen on the Kickstarter page when it launches. So if we talk about pre-marketing, your ad has one purpose, which is to build trust. Ideally, you get them to sign up to your email so that you can continue to build that relationship, so that when you do have your launch, you're going to see some traction there. So that's relevant when you're trying to create a great user experience with your brand, with your product. And that's why you should avoid bait and switch and some of these other mistakes that we brought up.
Absolutely. So let's talk about developing a board game from a marketing perspective. When we're talking about developing a board game from a marketing perspective, there are a lot of different angles, and we'll kind of get into some, like blind play testing and other things like that, things that you should be doing. But really, all of these things, I want to know as a marketer that is going to try to sell your thing or try to, expose your thing and get emails or backers for you or that kind of thing. These are the things that I want to know that you have done, and the ways that you can actually position your product that will really help me or will help us to do a better job for you. So the first one is just pure market research. If your game has been done before, I have a tangible example I really want to talk about, but I don't want to throw an individual person under the bus or a game name under the bus. I don't like being negative, but when you have a really cool idea, it will largely flop in the market if it's been done before. If you innovate, there's a room for you to potentially have an evergreen title that sells year after year, and that's kind of what everybody wants. But when you build a game that already exists, like if I think I invented deck building, my game is probably not going to do well unless it really truly innovates on that deck building. Like Star Realms and Ascension innovated on Dominion, and Clank, for example, innovated as well. So market research boils down to just playing a lot of games, right? You kind of want to know what's out there. Don't play a lot of games. You're not going to know what's out there, and you're not going to have as many tools as a game designer. So when you come to us with a product that's been done before, we can no longer use the angle of the mechanics are innovative, which cuts the number of tools that we have as a marketing team. What are some other examples of things that we like to see that people have done in the development of their product?
One thing I like to see is if people can clearly explain who this game is for and why they should care about it, or why should people think this is something that they should engage with. Because if they have trouble if the game developer has trouble articulating that, we're probably going to have trouble articulating that as well. Because they're the ones who designed the game. They can't really tell you who's it's for and why should people play it. Well, then how are we supposed to know if we're not as intimate with the material as you are? And I suppose the people we've worked with, some of the benefits of our work is we do work with some pretty passionate people who are really into their games and love talking about their games. And I love that. I love meeting these people who are really passionate about their games, and they do talk about their games, and a lot of them do have these questions worked out. But for some, maybe they don't. And that is something that you want to address before approaching marketing.
So what would be an example of somebody who we'll say, actually, I mean, really, when you've really got it figured out, that's awesome. But what are things that people say that just kind of indicates to us that they don't really have this figured out?
I suppose if they have a difficulty of forming a sentence, maybe it's very complicated. And it's like, oh, well, actually, it's this, and oh, there's a bit of that in there as well. And actually, let me think about that. I think that's the thing. It's you almost need like an elevator pitch where, like, you talked about deliverance. You could just, it rolls off the tip of your tongue. You've probably said it 1,000 times because you know exactly.
Christian fantasy dungeon crawler, Angels vs Demons dungeon crawler.
Yeah,
done. Right. And I can tell you why it's for, who it's for, and so on and so forth. Right. But yeah, I think the biggest mistake that I personally hear is when somebody says this game's for everyone. If it's for everyone, then nobody's going to buy it because it's not specifically made for me, right? I will not buy it because it's not made for me. There are other games that are perfect for me. But if your game is for everyone, it might be like mass market or something like that. Like Sorry is for everyone.
The other danger of that spectrum is, oh, it's for this niche within this niche within this niche. It's like, well, that's very niched, and that your market might be really great for those 5 people who want to buy that game, but you might have niched too far. It's kind of like being in the mines of Moria. You dig too deeply and you wake the Balrog. It's like that with marketing.
On the other side of that coin, you do have the potential. So you're right. You take a risk when you niche your game down, and the risk is that there might not be enough people that care about that particular topic. I have specific examples of products that I've marketed that they risked a lot to appeal to a very specific niche. I don't know how to say it. We'll use the dirty American English niche. I'll use that. They took a gamble and they lost. It's just one of those things. There are not that many people that, like, again, I don't want to get specific. I feel like the game will immediately be discovered. So
because it was that specific.
Yeah. Now, when I was talking about on the other side of the coin, when I said that, is that you may find that there is a group that is starving for a game like this. And in that case, you stand to be rewarded substantially. So the niche idea, you do want it to be in a niche. I said, post-apocalyptic, but, post-apocalyptic game that is for people that love beavers and really love building dams at home. That's probably too small to monetize. A bird watching game, everybody thought, oh, that's lame. No one would like that. And then, of course, Wingspan has sold, many, many, many copies, and it won the Advanced Game of the Year and so on and so forth. So you take a risk. Sometimes it really pays off. But yeah, sometimes it falls flat.
Yeah, I think it was Steven Jackson. I remember watching a lecture he did on game design, and he was talking about how it is the designer of Munchkin. And he was talking about how every year he probably designs about 3 or 4 games, but they never see the light of day because maybe one, there's enough people who would enjoy it, or just it's not a great game. And so I think you've got to sort of hold your game designs lightly, I suppose, and be willing to mold them and cut things out and put things in and re-examine them. And
yeah, if the game is easy to explain, then it's easy for me to position. If you need a 30-second elevator pitch to say what your game is, then that's a problem. You really need to avoid expensive mistakes. This is especially true with first-time game designers that don't rely on the income from their products for their living. Publishers that have published, 10 games, whatever, they have a company, they rely on, multiple employees rely on them for their paycheck and so on and so forth. They understand this. They understand the concept of avoiding expensive mistakes. But when I make a decent middle class income and I have enough to save and so on, maybe I have $500 a month or $1,000 a month or even $100 a month to save up. When I have money and I've saved it and the intent is to spend it on my game, the dream that I have to launch this game, the thing that I'm so excited about, a lot of the time people will make expensive mistakes because they can. Just because you can pay for something doesn't mean that you should pay for something. Mm-hmm. So a recent example would be I have a contact in a close circle of mine that is developing a collectible card game or a trading card game. And the niche it's already been done before, of course. It's also a very difficult niche to sell a product, but generally the big expensive mistake is that they're commissioning art for their collectible card game. They designed a card frame, they're commissioning art for each card and that kind of thing. And they haven't done a lot of playtesting yet. That is a rookie mistake that is going to cost them a lot of money. If they decide to retheme the game, all the art is wasted. If the audience doesn't resonate with the art, all the art is wasted. I would say that's probably the number one thing that will capsize a project is spending a ton of money that is wasted on art. I would estimate even the projects that do make it through are going to throw at least a third of the art that they do away. You have to learn what kind of style, for the game and so on and so forth. And more advanced publishers, of course, are going to limit the amount of money that they waste. But man, paying for something before you actually test the game is a huge mistake. And whenever I hear that somebody has this awesome game that all they need to do is play test it, all they need to do is market it, all they need to do is expose it, like, man, you should have exposed this thing when it was in its like a terrible looking product, you should test it with people and say, what do you think? And you should have heard that your game isn't that great and needs to improve and so on and so forth before you put all the money into the art. Because if you hear that your game, if put it this way, from a marketing perspective, if the art doesn't resonate with the target market, your product is not going to do well. If the gameplay doesn't resonate with the target market, your game's not going to do well. If your game promises, let's say, a more kiddie theme and ends up being like a very heavy, thinky type game, kids aren't going to play it. Kids are going to buy it. Adults are not going to buy it. And then the ones that play it aren't going to enjoy it, right? And so you really need to test your game with your target market through things like blind play testing, even in-person play testing where you're teaching the game and asking questions. You should play with game designers and get lots of feedback. Avoid investing a ton of money into a product that is going to change.
I think the other extreme is maybe not having a budget at all. And you have to, there is a bit of financial commitment to developing a game, and maybe you haven't really thought about that. Because I suppose it's like opening a can of worms, right? You probably start, I've got a cool idea for a game, and then suddenly like, wow, this is going to take a lot more time than I have, or a lot more money. And I suppose time is money. Maybe you don't have the ability to commit the time to, to actually developing this game and bringing it to the position where you want to. So
that's a great point. I want to drill down into that even more. And, because there are two groups of people that I encounter, or rather two common issues that I encounter in this area. The first one is you can't go to Kickstarter. I mean, the whole reason we go to Kickstarter is to raise money. Yes, you absolutely want to build awareness and exposure. Companies that quote unquote have the money to make a print run of their game will still go to Kickstarter. They should, because it's an absolute marketing amplifier. But when we're talking about going to Kickstarter, you cannot go to Kickstarter with an idea written down on a napkin or a piece of paper. You need to have like half of your art done or more, right? It needs to be a tangible product that people can look at. They need to be able to, you need to at least, give the illusion that this is the final product that you're going to receive. Look how much is done. A lot of people will do the box cover, will do some of the miniature sculpts, will do the map, will do some of the cards, and then they have 60% of their game left to do, but the visual pieces that give people the vision for what the game is going to be like are done. And I'll tell you what, if you do not have enough to wet someone's whistle so that they understand what it is that they're going to get, I can't sell that. Mm-hmm. So wrapping all of this stuff up, we talked about how to write ad copy. Then we also talked about, tips on actually developing a board game from a marketing perspective, which is, again, such a deep topic. And if you guys have any questions, just send us a message over at crowdfundingnerds.com. Ask your question there, and I'd be happy to address that on a future podcast.
Yeah, a lot of these things we touch on the podcast, we've actually gone into greater detail on our website through our resources and our articles that we've written there. So make sure to check those out. And we really do some deep dive into some of these concepts, and you can probably get a lot of answers there as well.
We would also like to thank you all for listening to this episode today. For more details on this episode, visit crowdfundingnerds.com/episode 2. And like Andrew was saying, if you have any questions, feel free to go to crowdfundingnerds.com/question, fill out the form, and it'll get to one of us and we'll help you out. We will see you all in the next episode, nerds. Adios.
See ya.
Top of the morning. No, wait.